The rights of people working in the garment industry, making clothing we buy here in Australia. We discuss labouring in the supply chains of the fashion industry and what we can do about it. From Melbourne, you're watching The World from Below. I'm Lizzie O'Shea. Tonight we're joined by Josh Cullinan from the Australia-Bangladesh Solidarity Network and Carolyn Kitto from Stop the Traffik. Josh is the Secretary of the Australian-Bangladesh Solidarity Network Incorporated, an association established to improve the lives of Bangladeshi workers through worker mobilisation in Bangladesh and Australia. Josh participated in 2 solidarity visits to Bangladesh in 2014. In his day job, he is a Senior Industrial Officer at the National Tertiary Education Union and is raising 3 children with his wife Diane. Carolyn is the co-director of Stop the Traffik in Australia. Stop the Traffik is a global campaign to end human trafficking. It asks fashion labels and retailers to take steps to make their fashion traffic-free. We start today's program looking at how labour practices in the developing world are relevant here in Australia. Josh, tell us about how the Australia-Bangladesh Solidarity Network got started.
Thanks, Lizzie. Well, it started last year after we had an experience in 2013 at the union I work for, where we had ordered some T-shirts, or many T-shirts, to be made in Australia. And when they arrived, we found the Australian logo had been pinned through the label, and the label said made in Haiti. And that started a conversation in our union about how that had come to be and what we could do about it. And that investigation occurred at the same time as the Rana Plaza collapse in April of 2013. That led us to want to find out more, and we tried to have a Bangladeshi trade unionist come to Australia. He was denied a visa, and we then took the step of trying to go and show solidarity with Bangladeshi garment workers and their organisers, and we sent a trip over last February of last year. Our experience was life-changing, as you can probably imagine, and when we got back we wanted to do a great deal about it and a great deal more, and we thought the best way was building solidarity links directly with Bangladeshi workers and their unions, and so that's why we started the network.
So we saw some images of the Rana Plaza collapse in the opening segment to this show. Can you remind us what actually happened in 2013?
So in April of 2013, there was actually a great, a disastrous fire in November of 2012 where over 100 workers were incinerated in a place called Tajreen Fashions, which still stands in Bangladesh now, and I guess the suburbs are slowly swallowing it. At Rana Plaza in April of 2013, on the 23rd of April, there were loud cracking in the building heard, and the columns were starting to crack, and workers didn't know what was really going on, but they were frightened and they left the building. On April 24th, they turned up for work again and waited outside to see what was happening. They were concerned that if they didn't work that day, they might not have been paid for the month, so they were concerned to at least be there. The workers that worked for the banks and the government and other organisations in the building never went back into Rana Plaza, but the workers in the garment factories were forced back in, and they were beaten back in. They were told it was safe. They were told they wouldn't be paid if they didn't go back in. In they went, and half an hour or so later, the power went out. They then started generators, and the building collapsed. And over the next 17 days, the people that were pulled out numbered the thousands, but unfortunately, or tragically, or whatever we want to call it, over 1,000 people died. 1,130 people died, and there's still corpses being found now. And
I just saw in the news recently that there was a compensation fund that's set up, but it looks like it might be running out of money.
There is a compensation fund. It's run by the Prime Minister's office. It's made up of many millions of dollars, and there is debate about what is left in it. We understand from activists on the ground in Bangladesh that the vast majority of that compensation fund still sits there. It just simply hasn't been spent. There are a lot of major retailers who haven't contributed to it, and their contributions are required to provide a very, very minimal compensation payment to people who will never work again, to orphans, to people that have lost family members. We're not talking $30,000 or $40,000 each. We're talking really just in the hundreds of dollars to compensate them so that they can afford to for those very basic necessities of food and housing.
Now, Carolyn, your organisation is called Stop the Traffik. Can you tell us what you mean when we talk about human trafficking?
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. It's really important that we use the language in the right kind of way, and what Josh is talking about is extreme labour exploitation. When we talk about human trafficking, there are actually definitions, and there's certain things that happen need to happen for it to be human trafficking. So the people who are brought in, who are trafficked or are in modern forms of slavery, they have to be coerced or deceived into the process in some kind of way. So in other words, they're promised one thing and then they're delivered another. They're promised a salary or a traineeship, or that they'll be safe, and then when they arrive they find that they're not paid money, or in fact they may even have a debt, and they don't get that traineeship. There is also often movement involved in human trafficking, so it may be that they're just simply moved from one side of a village to another, but often it's from one state to another or one country to another. So they're actually moved from the community that would be protecting them into another situation. The final thing is that power is exerted over them to stop their freedom. So that may be psychological power, like if you leave we'll hurt your family, so it may be threats, but it may actually be things like that they're actually locked in a factory or their passport's taken away and they're not able to move. They're not able to leave without their identification papers. So that's what we mean when we're talking about human trafficking or modern slavery. It's one end of the spectrum, and I guess in its essence is the most extreme form of labour exploitation.
Can you tell us a bit about the work that you've done in the Tamil Nadu region in India?
Yeah. So I visited India, I've visited this region a number of times. Tamil Nadu is a very poor state of India. But Tirupur, where the spinning, weaving and dyeing factories are focused, is actually known as the Dollar City because so many people make such a lot of money. So this is the part of the supply chain that makes the fabric, and it primarily makes the sorts of fabric that end up in knitted cotton items. So the sorts of things that make our t-shirts, that make sweatpants and
that
those
we would
sorts.
use here in Australia as well.
Absolutely, that we would use here in Australia, yes, into our products. And the first time I visited there, the overwhelming feeling was in a room with a group of women that told me how they'd been promised money, how they'd been promised a job, how they'd been promised that they would be safe, and what they experienced was the exact opposite. Rarely did they get the money. They weren't safe either health-wise, and often they were sexually abused as well, and their freedom was taken away. They weren't allowed to leave the factories. They would often work shifts end on end, only allowed out maybe once every 4 months, and then it was on a supervised visit to the local shopping centre. It was human trafficking and modern slavery.
We're going to take a quick break. You're watching The World from Below, and when we come back, we'll discuss how the fruits of exploitative labour practices can be found here in Australia.